Welcome to Motivation Monday, and this week it's all about foiling. Okay. Luckily, we're not going to be chatting about how to kind of work foil best in your hair, but we're talking about Olympic foiling and how best that works. So I'm going to switch over to some special guests that we've got with us this week. So I'm going to start off with Matt Barton. So tell us who you are, what you're up to, and how you're involved in foiling.
Hi, so my name is Matt Barton. I am previously an RSX windsurfer with the British sailing team, and I began to transition to the foil starting in the end of December. And now, I'm a young, new foiler. So it's, all very exciting at the moment.
Thank you. And next up, Kirstie Urwin.
Hiya, I'm Kirstie, and I crew a foiling Nacra 17. And before that, I sailed the non-foiling Nacra 17 and then FX and 470. So I've done a lot of different crewing, but now on to the good stuff for foiling.
The foiling stuff, cracking. And last but not least, Ellie Aldridge.
Hello, I am Ellie Aldridge. I am a kite foiler. I have been for a year and a half. Started through the Kite for Gold scheme, and previous to that I was sailing 49er FX.
Cool, thank you very much. Cool. So this week the idea is what we're going to do is we're going to talk through that idea of foiling in the games. We've got 3 foiling classes in the games for 2024, so one of those in for 2020 and then 2024 and beyond, and we're just looking at how you guys have got into it, what you think that pathway might look like, what the challenges are, what the differences are. But before we get too far into the ins and outs of it, it's actually just a bit of a chat about foiling. So versus the craft you have been in to what you're using now, describe what it feels like. Do you like it? Do you wish it would go back to the good old days? Are you happy on your foil? So I don't mind who wants to go first, but tell us about what's the feel of foiling like.
Who's going first?
I'll go first.
So, like I just said, I transitioned. I initially sailed 470, and then I transitioned into 49er FX for a bit. Then I started sailing the Nacra, and then the Nacra transitioned into foiling. So I've kind of gone from maybe the slowest Olympic boat you can sail to the fastest, and one of the fastest. Maybe kite foiling's a bit faster, but I
think you'll find we're all quite fast.
Yeah, technically you're not. Well, you are foiling around now, I guess, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, yes you are.
We'll compare some GPS speeds in a bit. It's all right. We don't have to get a bit.
Well,
yes,
I guess for me, I had to go from that getting used to going really, really fast, and that's one of the first things that you learn about foiling. But for me, it's the effort to reward ratio in foiling is amazing. So you put in quite a lot of effort, but then you get up in foiling and you get going really, really fast. Your adrenaline gets pumping, and it's so much fun. And the reward you get from that is I think it's so much higher than you get from any other boat. Obviously, every boat has their own plus points, etc. But for me, that feeling of foiling is just indescribable, and it's so different to any other boat that I've ever sailed. It's just so much fun.
Cracking. Right, who's next then?
Well, I'd like to piggyback onto what Kirstie was saying about the experience, because coming from the RSX, which is quite a heavy windsurfing board, quite sluggish, what was very exciting for me with the foil was not only once you got up and foiling were you then going very fast, but then you just kept accelerating because there was such little drag. You just rushed up, you got faster and faster and faster, and actually it's not until a ridiculous speed that you then start topping out and not speeding up anymore with the pressure. And so for me, that was a very exciting thing. Also, we obviously all windsurf in Portland Harbour all the time. Now we're foiling. Portland Harbour is very small, and it's just, that is a very satisfying feeling, being able to just whip around the harbour, constantly foiling. Oh, it's good. Can't wait for lockdown to finish so we can back out there and foiling again.
Well, a little tear there, Matt. Suddenly,
yeah, mate, it got me all nostalgic. It's like, it wants to go.
Back out there. Cool. Right, Ellie, go for it.
I guess the difference for me compared to both Kirstie and Matt is, I guess you two both both your classes were non-foiling before, so it's quite a nice transition from the RSX to now foiling, or Nacra now foiling. Whereas I guess for me, I was sailing in a double-handed skiff, and now I'm on a tea tray foiling, going like 3 times the speed.
Ridiculous speeds.
So it's very, very different, almost uncomparable, but it still is. But it's insane. There's like, it's just you on a tea tray and this tiny little foil sticking out the bottom and then attached to this great big kite. It's insane.
It's just so different, isn't it? Just
so different.
Okay, so you've all mentioned speed. Just because I felt, there was a bit of who's going fastest, who's going where. Anyone, how fast are you going? Anyone know?
I really don't know. I know that Ellie's the fastest. There's no doubt.
Yeah, Ellie's definitely the fastest. Yeah. Like without doubt, Ellie is just cruising, lapping us. In fact, that is one of Ellie's favourite.
Kirstie.
We're around us and make us feel really inadequate about ourselves.
When you think you're going quite fast.
It's like we feel fast, then Ellie launches.
But it's funny because speed is it's hard to compare when you're not racing against somebody or you're not with somebody. It's hard to compare how fast you're going. So for me, that doesn't feel that fast. But then coming up below you and then like basically underrolling and doing a lap around you, it's like, wow, yeah, kind of are going fast.
Out of interest, are you guys using GPSs and stuff to record your speeds?
Yeah, we do quite often. Nice. It's quite fun.
What's your
top speed?
What's my top speed? I don't have a massive top speed. I think it's early 30 knots, like 31, 32 knots.
Nice.
After that, I haven't quite reached the next like level.
Is the next hurdle a technical thing or a bravery thing? I think
that's a really good question. I think it's a bit of both.
Yeah. I definitely noticed when I started foiling in the early months of January, I could go faster. I had the skills to go faster, but I just wasn't brave enough to actually.
Yeah, particularly downwind. It's all just
downwind. Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah,
I agree with that.
It's interesting you say that because you two are obviously sailing alone, whereas I've got a teammate. So I sail with Michael Rupert, and Ru is so much braver than I am, and it's so good that he's on the stick because he pushes the boat so much harder. Like there's definitely times when there's stuff I can do on the boat to slow it down, and he's shouting at me for being a chicken. And he's like, come on, we can go faster than this, stop being a chicken. And I think we get some of the top speeds downwind because Rupert is just an absolute maniac and just keeps pushing and pushing the boat. But the Nacra, when you get going really fast, just feels so loose. I think because it's been converted from a boat that wasn't meant to foil, and so you just get to this point where the whole boat is juddering along and you're like, oh, we feel like we're on a knife edge, let's please not crash off this knife edge. But yeah, he's definitely braver than me.
I do think it's impressive because just like the size of our foil and our board compared to us seems so much more manageable. With you guys, not only is there 2 of you, not only is it a massive boat, but then you're trying to do exactly the same things that we're trying to do. I think it's really impressive.
It's really cool.
So because there's 2 of you, does that make the comms easier because there's less noise, or is it no different, or?
No, like comms is so important in the Nacra, and it's weird because you kind of go from, so when Ru and I first started foiling, we were talking a lot, but then we've kind of transitioned to this point where we know each other so well, and the communication has to be so efficient because actually the more you communicate, there's obviously a time lag between that communication and being able to react to that communication, and often stuff happens so fast foiling that in that time lag it's already too late. So Ru and I have got to this point where we're able to communicate so efficiently. Ru can say one word, or I can sense a movement in him and I know exactly what he wants me to do already, or he's really good at, because he's obviously behind me because he's helming, so he's really good at perceiving the way I'm moving, so to be able to move in the same way as I am. But that communication it becomes less verbal and more sort of the body language type stuff as you get better and better and you get more in sync with each other.
So yeah, I suppose that instinctive side, because I think what I've noticed with like all foiling craft is we all have the same sort of doomsday issue, which is like riding the wild dolphin, isn't it? Like you get out of phase, like if you're just slightly behind the lag, you don't react quick enough. You've got the same thing, which I'm guessing when there's two of you, it's probably loads worse, isn't it? If there's a bit of a lag, it's like you just once you're going, aren't you?
Yeah, and also the Nacra just has absolutely no tolerance for that. So it's just a bucking bronco, and it will just eject you as quickly as it feels like it. So as soon as you start to get behind, it's already too late in the Nacra. You're going down the mine.
We've all seen that incredible video of the US sailors swinging around.
Oh yeah, lots of people would have seen that viral video, and that went really, really terribly wrong really quickly.
Yeah.
They were very lucky not to injure themselves.
Okay, so we've got that thing. So we're going faster. Suddenly, big spaces are much smaller spaces, and you've got this whole thing of like, you've got to put a bit of effort in. But once you put a bit of effort in, you're getting loads more reward for it, and probably sailing angles that you never thought were possible beforehand as well, which is pretty cool. So in terms of like transitioning from the craft you were on into that, and I know for Ellie it's really different because it was just totally different. What were your main challenges? So like when you started going foiling, what were the main challenges? Like Matt mentioned a bit like bravery being a bit of a challenge to start with, all that sort of stuff. And technical, is it anything else? Like, how do you guys successfully transitioned onto foiling craft?
So so number one was the bravery aspect, just going faster, just getting used to those higher speeds. I think that was huge for me initially. And number two, learning how to repair the nose of a board. That was quite a crucial step of learning to foil. So teach myself proper board repairs, because that is one of the downsides of if you top out and go around the front, you do damage your board occasionally. But other than that, it was really just getting the new feel and understanding what shifts in your weight and different pressures does to the board and to the foil. So it's getting that feel that was very different to normal windsurfing. But once I began to understand the new feel, actually then it was just like normal windsurfing. And that was what was a really nice surprise for me. I was a bit like, oh, this is very unusual, this is very alien. And then you got the feel and you realized it was just like normal windsurfing, except you're hovering and going faster, so much more comfortable. It was fantastic. So that's probably the main changes for me, was getting different feels, understanding what different weight distributions does to the foil and to the board, and then it was just like normal windsurfing.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, Matt, because for the Nacra we transitioned obviously from a non-foiling to foiling, and they just retrofitted the boat. And I can remember our first Europeans, I think people had the boats for like 2 weeks. Like we really got thrown in at the deep end with this whole foiling thing. But everyone was kind of expecting the new foiling edition to come out, and everyone would be foiling around 100% of the time, and that the game would be who could basically fly the most. And actually, as it turns out, 95% of the time, we're not actually foiling upwind, because the design of the boat just isn't quite there. The boat's quite heavy and clunky, and the foils just aren't quite the right design just yet. And so for us, it was a weird transition, because some aspects of the boat actually stayed very, very similar. We had more drag in the water for going upwind because we had these massive foils suddenly in the water, but actually tactically nothing really changed. But then suddenly you round the windward mark and you were up on the foils, and that was a completely different mindset. And so I think when you looked at the results of that event, it was the people that actually didn't change their mindset as much and just treated it like a normal boat that really performed. And then actually the people that had tried to change their mindset and were expecting this massive change, those were the people that really struggled, because they were struggling to shift from one mindset to the other. Whereas actually, if you just treated it like a normal boat, it was kind of, that was the best way to get it around the course.
Now, from my memory, correct me if I'm wrong, I seem to remember that Nacras, when they first went foiling, people were foiling upwind with the spinnaker or something ridiculous like that in super light winds. Is that
so we weren't foiling upwind, but yeah, we were putting the kites up upwind, which again completely changed the game because the loads were so high. So that was one thing. Like, it was quite funny. We came off the start line, I think it was day 2 of racing, and the Kiwis just hoisted their kite and sailed off. And everyone, the panic, basically, they're like, oh my God. And everyone's like putting their kites off and then trying to work out angles. Like the crews, we all blew our forearms up because we couldn't hold on to the kite sheet because the load was so high. And it was people that were most adaptable that then performed well, because basically people worked out, you just got the kite sheet wrapped around your hook on your trapeze.
Nice,
put it in, and that was the only way to get the kite in and basically turn it into, rather than a spinnaker, a jenica. And so, but I think what all those stories taught us was that it's about being adaptable and being able to react fast to those changes. And actually in foiling, you have to be able to react to those changes really fast. And that's what we were learning at that really early stage, that it was about being adaptable and being able to adapt really quickly, and actually around that, just sailing it like a normal boat, but having that reactivity to it.
So like adaptability is kind of your key thing there.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So, yeah, I love the idea that someone suddenly hoists a spinnaker on the start line. Everyone's like, mass panic. Like, just do that. That's the right thing to do.
Like,
Never done it before. Race one of the world championships. Right, let's try it.
Yeah.
Was it? Yeah, race how you train and train how you race, isn't it?
Yeah.
Just try it. You never know. It might work. Cool. How about you, Ellie?
In terms of getting into foiling, I guess so I could kite surf before I started foiling, so I could go along on like a twin tip back and forwards. But in terms of getting on a foil, it's almost a bit like riding a bicycle. Like, if like first 2 or 3 sessions you can't do it, and then you kind of do it for a bit, and then you're foiling for a little bit longer, and then you drop down, and then you go for a little bit longer, and then you drop down, and then you slowly kind of, I guess, remember all like the muscle memory of how to do it. And then once you've got it, I mean, going along in a straight line on a kite foil, if you can kite surf, isn't hard. It's not rocket science at all. If you've got a nice easy foil, it's really simple. But I think it's the maneuvers, and when you start going a bit faster, that's the hard part. Like, I guess it took me 6 months to learn how to tack, and that was like every single day, all day, every day. That's all I did. So yeah, getting into it, it's not that hard. I mean, you can see by how well the girls that only started to learn to kite surf like just over a year ago could foil pretty easily. But it's the rest. When you start progressing, you think it kind of goes like this. You learn to foil in a straight line, and then you're like this, and then you plateau a bit, and then you start to try and do maneuvers, and you're just like falling in.
Yeah.
And then it takes ages to get to the next stage, and then you go to the next stage. We're still going like this.
It sounds a bit weird. It's like, so I suppose where you were all at in your sailing careers, you know, when you first learned to sail or windsurf, like you do the equivalent of that, don't you? Like you
Yeah.
It's probably been quite a long time since you've done that. Like, you know, actually effectively being a beginner again.
Yeah, exactly.
Was it just? Did you all just have to be prepared to crash a lot? Like, you know, just
pretty much. Yeah, it was really hard actually. Last winter, it literally felt like you were like 10 again, like learning all of those things that you learned when you were learning to sail and growing up, but all in like the space of a couple of months. Yeah, crashing all the time, like every 20 seconds.
I think that's one of the things I enjoyed most transitioning from the RSX was we spent the last 2 years training for the tiniest of gains that you don't see in a session, and then you hopped on the foil, you got instant feedback of sail or crash, you got massive gains every session, and it was just so satisfying to see massive improvement and be learning or feel like you're learning a lot again, and that was just such a great experience.
Yeah, that was quite an interesting one for us actually, because for all of us it was so new, like going back to like maneuvers and stuff, because you have to think about the foil and the kite, and none of us had any idea what we were doing. We didn't know what it was meant to feel like, and it made you appreciate the like where we were with our sailing careers, like everything was so second nature. And then going into kiting and you're just like, I don't even know what this is meant to feel like, let alone how am I even meant to do it. And it gives you like a different outlook on learning to do something again from the beginning, which I think is really important, especially like when you get a bit older and like not many people do new things or learn new things from the start. It's really good.
You reckon this is a well prepped year for lockdown because now we're all so like,
this is not prepared as well for lockdown. We've been introduced to one of the most enjoyable things in the world.
All we want to do is go on the water.
Are you trying to say that baking banana bread is not as enjoyable as
There he goes. He's talking about banana bread again. Slipped it in there somewhere.
There we go. I will get it right. Cool. Yeah, so actually, do you think, so where you've all had to go through, sounds a bit weird, but learning something really new later in your career, is that then changed, as you kind of started to get some mastery of foiling, do you reckon that's changed your outlook going back into things that you're already quite good at? So like the racing, are you now looking at learning that differently, or is that just re-infused you for a different challenge, or change how you learn stuff?
I think for me, like, it comes down to kind of what Ellie was saying around like where no one knows what the right answer is. Those people that are the most innovative in the way that they're trying to learn are the people that make the most progress. And that's one thing that I've definitely taken from learning to foil. Like, if you can be really innovative, like we spent the first winter being told off by our coach over and over again because he had a perception in his head of what was the right way to sail downwind. And we were not doing what he perceived was the right way to sail downwind. And basically because he'd seen a top team doing something that was fast at the time. And then we were trying something different. And yeah, initially it wasn't working. But then all of a sudden we got through the winter and into the spring and we were the quickest downwind in the world. And like we all had to massively change our perception of what was the right and what was wrong, and actually trying to be a bit more innovative and try different things. That was definitely a change in all of our mindsets, and I think taking that into other aspects of our racing and our training has made huge differences to the way we can perform. Yeah, it's really interesting, isn't it? It's like you don't know what you don't know, so let's go and try different stuff and find out. That's pretty cool. Well, that's a pretty cool thing to do. And do you think so? Now you guys have taken all that into racing. What are the biggest differences when you go racing? Like, so could like in a foiling craft versus a planing craft or a displacement craft, have you got any sort of big different considerations, do you think?
I think the decision making has to be a lot faster. Obviously, closing speeds are much quicker, so you have to be more reactive and make your decisions earlier because things happen faster. But otherwise, and there's obviously elements of the starting that are different. And for us, there's the whole new dynamic of pumping. So we can pump the windsurfing boards, and unlike the RSX, where you pump hard and you make a tiny difference, if you pump hard on the foil, you can make such a huge difference in not only speed but also height upwind. It's such a tactical tool to use, and that's something that we're still yet to fully explore in terms of. I haven't done enough racing to fully answer this question, but from my experience so far, those are probably the main things I've noted: pumping, closing speeds, and also minimizing tacks, because they are even more expensive now than they were before.
Try having two hulls to slap down into the water.
Yeah, true. I think we probably all do. Yeah. And what's yours like, Ellie? How's yours for tacking speed? Because if you do it really well, do you lose much, or?
You definitely lose some. It's definitely worse than just going in a straight line, but less so than both of yours, I'd say.
Yeah.
But if you're comparing someone's straight line speed and someone's tacking is a lot slower. Driving, not necessarily that much slower. But yeah, it's still same as what you were saying with the racing tactics. So much of it is just about like really, really quick decision making and like looking ahead. Not even looking ahead one stage, like almost looking ahead like two stages. Because one tack on the starboard lay could set you up for like where you're gonna go into the bottom mark. Like it's so quick. Like our races are like between 10 and 20 minutes, so it's pretty fast. Just everything's just so fast paced, and you just gotta almost it makes it quite easy because there's only one person, so you just do, like, as soon as you think about something you just do it. Like you can't second think it or anything like that. You just immediately have to just do it.
I think the biggest thing for me is obviously the speed and decision making comes into it. I think that's something that we can all relate to, but for me it's the fact that things change really quickly. So in the Nacra fleet, you can be pretty much last and you can still get a decent result. Like people, it's not uncommon for people to go from almost last to almost first or first. Like there's always that opportunity out there, you just need to find it. And you don't necessarily see that in displacement sailing as much. So I think sometimes, like, I've just spent the winter sailing 470 actually because of injury in my team, and it's pretty demoralizing when you have a bad upwind and you're like, cool, this is my lot for the next 45 minutes. Whereas in a foiling class, you might round the women mark in a position that you're not very happy with, but actually if you can find those opportunities, you can fully get yourself back into the race. And I think that's something that's potentially quite different from other types of sailing. And
also on the other hand of that, the stakes are high with, if you crash and fall, you lose a lot of places very quickly.
Yeah.
But I suppose for all of you, that speed difference between fully lit foiling and not foiling is just like stop and go based, isn't it? It's like sending it on and off.
Ellie's difference of foiling and not foiling is foiling or swimming.
It literally is. So the last race of the Mexico Pro Tour this year, we hadn't had any wind all day and they were really desperate to get a race away. So we sat around all day, and then a tiny bit of wind came in and they sent us out. I think only half the people made it to the start line. It was like 3 to 4, 5 knots. And yeah, basically I dropped a tack. That's the thing with kiting. As soon as you come off the foil, I guess you guys, if you drop off the foil, you can still go along a bit. For us, if you drop off the foil and there's not much wind, you're in the water. And yeah, I dropped off the foil. No chance I was getting back up in the air. Kite fell in the water. Had to swim home.
Mental.
Yeah,
that's pretty brutal, isn't it? And I'm guessing swimming over the finish line doesn't count though.
No, unfortunately not.
It's cool. Well, and in a Nacra as well, like downwind, if you touch down hard, is that a stop dead moment, Kirstie, or is that a kind of like you can get away with it, or you?
Well, it very much depends on the wind speed. So if it's that really marginal foiling stuff, so sort of 5-6 knots, you can round the women mark, and if you get up on the foil, you're off. But if you then drop off the foil, like you're just watching everyone else behind you coming down foiling. You're like the whole fleet can compress, and like it's like an accordion. It like compresses, and then like someone will get up on the foil, and yeah, the worst thing possible is if you go around the women mark in a lull and you can't quite get up on the foil, and then the next group behind you comes around in a gust and they just get up on the foil and you just watch them foil past you because they get up in that gust that they can foil in, and then the wind drops down to speeds where you can't actually foil, but because they're already up they're able to maintain that momentum, and there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, and you just sat there like twiddling your thumbs like sweet.
So I suppose for all of you that are racing, like your decision making then it's like it's almost effing the outcome of your decisions just turned up to like 110%, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like a bad decision, it's like you get really nailed for it. You make a good decision, you're suddenly like a leg ahead of the whole fleet.
Yeah, it is quite interesting. I kind of like to think of it as like all the other classes, all the slow boat classes, they're so ahead in their development, and everything's so perfect because you have to be so good that you're fine-tuning everything. Whereas for all us fast boats, everything's so new, so fast, so upbeat that there's such a big range between like something that goes wrong, a bad decision or a good decision. That's why there can be so many swaps and changes, and there can also be so many extensions in like distances. It's really interesting.
I think it's all comes. Sorry, Kirstie.
Right. I was just going to say, you see people doing really wacky stuff because they've just seen something like, they'll have seen like a gust like miles outside the race course, and they're just gunning for it because they're like, if I can get
that's
in that
mad.
gust, and then I can just fall back into the race course, I've overtaken everyone. So those high risk decisions become really high reward as well. So it's a different mindset, that risk reward versus playing it safe and knowing when to take those risks is pretty big.
I guess that's quite a big thing with our the fast foiling boats, is a lot of it is just risk versus reward and like risk management, and I guess we just have to take sometimes more extreme risks to try and gain more.
I think because obviously the angles are so high that when you're on a lift in pressure, that difference between a knock it out of pressure is just so ridiculous that the swapping and the gains make that risk reward seem so much higher. But actually, I think it's the same decisions we're making, just the difference
you're probably right.
in outcome is just so huge.
Yeah,
that's what I've found, especially in shifty foiling. You can be dropped and then completely come back, like Kirstie said, in no time, just by one good shift.
So the decision making is the same, but reviewing it becomes easier.
Like, do you think we made a gain? I'm not sure.
I'm not foiling, and everyone's finished. No, okay, so we talked a bit about your challenges you all came into the class, or there's different bits you did. If we've probably got lots of juniors and stuff looking at this and thinking, if I was a junior, I'd be like, I want to be in the cool, fast, oily boat potentially, because that's maybe how I'm wired.
Or board.
Yeah, or board. maybe I might go windsurfing. All kind of, all that. It's hard actually, all of them. So if you were going to plot the best routes, or there might be a few different routes, into each of your classes, what do you reckon that route might be? So if you were going back to Ellie was mentioning like being that 10-year-old again, and you wanted to follow in your footsteps, or whether that be in a foiling Nacra or a foiling windsurf or a foiling kite, any thoughts on what you think the best route is if you want to go racing, especially?
I think for me in the Nacra, if you look at the top teams, and maybe this is a little bit of function that the Nacra came in after a few years of there not being a catamaran in the games, and then a lot of the teams that are the top teams, they're sort of helms that have come back having done tornado campaigns. But if you look at the top teams, they're all very varied in their experience. So they've sailed lots of different classes of boats, they've got experience across a wide variety of different sailing types, and I think that being able to, in the Nacra particularly, being able to take that experience from lots of different classes and then sort of amalgamate that into what you need for the Nacra to be the perfect Nacra crew or the perfect Nacra helm, that experience in sort of the technical side of things and having the physical side of things right, and understanding just how boats work generally, really gives you a really good grounding for them being able to do well in the Nacra. I don't think I would necessarily say you need to sail this boat and then you need to sail this boat to be able to then get into the Nacra, because if you look at my path, I've sailed loads of different boats, and every time I go sailing, I'm drawing on experience that I've got from a different class that I've sailed. And so just having that broad range of knowledge is really, really helpful when you have a boat that, especially with the Nacra, where actually we're sometimes foiling, we're not foiling, having that wide variety of experience is really, really valuable.
I suppose that comes back to what you said earlier about being adaptable.
Yeah,
more adaptable you're going to be.
Definitely.
Yeah. So basically do everything. Do it all, as much experience as you can.
Yeah.
Rather than focusing down the necessarily I suppose the foiling bit. You can practice, learn that, can't you?
Yeah, and I think ultimately with foiling as well, like there is enough of a pathway in foiling that like you wouldn't necessarily need to jump straight on the Nacra from a 29er or whatever you've been sailing at youth. You wouldn't necessarily need to jump straight onto the Nacra and go foiling. There are other classes that you can foil in to learn that skill and learn that feeling and develop that feel for foiling, and then transfer that across to the Nacra. So actually by having sailed different boats, that helps you. Whereas actually if you went from, say you sailed a 420 and then you decide, I'm going to go Nacra sailing, that learning curve is just monumentally steep. Whereas if you've done some other bits along the way, it actually does help flatten that curve off a little bit and make it less of a daunting task.
Yeah, got you. Cool. Ellie, what do you reckon?
I totally agree with what Kirstie said about having as much sailing experience in different classes and different boats. It's kind of what I did when I was growing up, like just sailed everything, and you're always going to learn stuff and can implement it into different classes. But in terms of kite foiling, it's just so different. But I definitely appreciate my racing background, especially now that I can actually like get around the course and race. It feels so nice again to like not have to think about racing. Like I absolutely love it now because I can actually use all my racing knowledge, and it's just way faster and it's just really, really fun. So I think in terms of getting into kite foiling, I think racing experience isn't crucial because you can learn it along the way, but I do think it is really important, and it just makes it much easier because you're learning so many things. Like learning to kite foil is kind of what Kirstie said. It's like this, like it's so steep, and once you can get around the course and race, if you already have that previous knowledge of how to race and how to do everything properly, it eases that curve a little bit, and it makes you feel like you're actually getting somewhere because you can actually think about the racing. So I think that's really good, especially fast boat. I would say probably the FX or the 49 is the closest racing that I've ever done to kite racing, just because it's quite fast. And then I guess you just have to kind of be a bit fearless, really. Like you look at all the top guys and they're just absolute nutters. They just absolutely send it. There's definitely an element in kite racing where at times you just got to not think about it and just go as fast as you can, because a lot of it is speed. So I think if you can,
speed makes it look like a tactical genius, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
It really, really does. So there's obviously an element of racing, and I think we're still developing fleet. Like as everyone gets better, there'll be more of a racing element involved in it. So tactics will be much more important. And it still is important, but because everyone is still developing and getting faster, speed is really obvious now.
So I suppose you've got like two parts in there, haven't you? So actually, if you're a young kiter now,
yeah,
and you're like sending it and fearless, then actually you're on the right path. But
absolutely,
trying to build up a bit of racing experience. But the same way, if you've not kited yet, but you're a sailor with loads of racing experience, no worries, you could switch across level kite and go from there.
Yeah. Definitely.
There's still quite a few options.
Yeah.
Cool. But yeah, fearless is your key one. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, that's good. What about you, Matt? What about the windsurfers?
So, I think that, as I said previously, the big thing for me was once I developed the feel of foiling, it became just like windsurfing. And also recapping to how when you fall in, you lose loads of places. You need to have absolute bulletproof maneuvers. The crucial thing is to just be a really good all-round windsurfer. So I think it's so valuable to come up through the techno, get some racing experience along the way, because you're going to need that racing experience. Learn to sail different modes on the techno, learn to plane, learn to rail, learn to pump, all that sort of stuff. But also get yourself shortboarding. If you can, buy a foil, have a play on it, start getting some feel. But really, it's exactly like the other girls have said, get a sort of feel in all the different classes, get an understanding of all the different modes and types of windsurfing, and then you'll be an all-rounder. And that's what's really nice with the foiling at the moment. We're seeing such a resurgence with people coming back who dropped out of the program, or people who dropped out because they weren't interested in RSX or whatever, coming back to do foiling because it benefits those who are good windsurfers. You see fantastic wave sailers and freestylers who are then good windsurfers learn foiling, and they can pick up the racing as they go. So learn to windsurf and get good at windsurfing all round. And if you can get a foil, have a play on it. But it's not just foil the only thing. I think that's my 2 cents on the matter.
Cool. That's all right. It's a good 2 cents. So actually, I think from all of you there is that broad range of experience that you're going for. I suppose the more experience you've got in different stuff, the more adaptable you are, the easier you'll find that that transition.
For sure.
Off and away. Right, so on to the big one I get asked about a lot in foiling. Is it more dangerous than normal sailing, windsurfing? What's your perception? Is it safe, or probably a better question is, what are your considerations to keep it safe? So that might be a better question to kind of go for.
Okay, well, this is an area of pretty big debate in the Nacra fleet right now. Unfortunately, we've had quite a few sort of foil strikes, injuries. Like Rupert and I have had our own injuries. The British sailing team have had injuries within the Nacra squad. And I think, I don't want to say that injury is inevitable with foiling, but I think if you look at any sailor's career, then injury is something that happens, because I think ultimately we're pushing our bodies really hard every time we go sailing, and at some point an accident might happen or just something might give. So there's a lot of chat around how we can mitigate for that safety and make it a bit safer and that injury risk a bit lower. So in the Nacra, we all wear helmets. That's a mandatory rule. We have to wear helmets every time we go sailing, and I wouldn't sail the Nacra without my helmet. The amount of times we've just had a little crash, and I've then come in from sailing or racing, and there's a massive scratch on my helmet, and I'm like, wow, like actually that could have been my head if I hadn't been wearing my helmet. Like, you don't realise like some of the injuries that we as a British squad have seen, like they've happened when we're actually going really slowly. So I think the perception with injuries in foiling is that they happen when you're going really fast, but actually some of them can happen when you're going really slowly. So it's not necessarily more dangerous because you're going faster. Like, yes, some of the injuries do come from that, but injuries can happen whenever. So yes, we wear helmets, we wear body armor, so we have impact protection in our shins and our knees in our wetsuits, and then if it's a really big day, I will sometimes wear shoulder pads and elbow pads, because we're being thrown, we crash every day, but we crash, and we crash a bit harder, and we're sort of falling on our shoulders and our elbows quite often. And then one of the other things that the class have recently introduced is wearing cut resistant leggings underneath our wetsuits, basically to try and mitigate the foil strike. So people have fallen out of the boat, and then the boat's going so fast and you hit the foil, and that's caused a few sort of slice injuries in the past, but they're actually a lot more rare than you think. Like, I think with injuries it's a weird one, because you hear about an injury, but you don't necessarily hear about the times that people have maybe fallen out of the boat and not had an injury.
Yeah. And
that does happen a lot. And so I think it's a difficult one, because quite often you hear about these injuries, but you hear about them, it seems like you're hearing about a lot of them, but actually a lot of the time there's stuff happening, and like there's absolutely no consequence of it, and that is potentially because of the precautions we've put in place. And I don't want to scare people and be like, oh, you have to wear all this kit to be able to go foiling and to be safe foiling, but I just think it's one of those things where actually, if you think about the amount of hours we're putting into the boat, for the amount of injuries we're really getting, like you compare that to going cycling, for example, on the road. If you're putting that amount of hours cycling on the road, you probably would experience an injury at some point, because you haven't clipped in properly and you fall off your bike, or some idiot comes around the corner too fast and you have crash into a wall, or whatever it is. Like, those injuries happen in every sport if you put enough hours into it. So actually, really, I don't think if you compared it to other sports, the injury rate would be any higher, really, compared to the amount of hours you're putting in.
Yeah, and you're just doing some specific stuff to help mitigate those by wearing the right gear and
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
That's cool. What about on the boards?
So I think we're at an advantage because we've got less to hit than Kirstie. If we crash, a lot of the time we're not going to be hitting much. The only I haven't been foiling that long, but I've not had any injury yet, touch wood. The only thing I have is when you pop out the top and you get catapulted, damaging the nose of my board, which is just a part of foiling now. It's the fragile boards and we're going at high speed, so things like that will happen. Like Kirstie, we wear helmets, and if you stick to Sam Ross's golden rule of always keeping hold of the boom, you can't get run over by the foil. So at the moment, from all the foiling I've done, I feel very, very safe foiling. The only thing that might start adding to that is when we start racing, and if we start putting a lot of people on the start line or a lot of people going around leeward marks, that's the time that I can maybe see potentially more risk being involved. But hopefully by that point we'll be, looking into that and deciding, do we need smaller fleets or managing that with wider gate marks or however that might be to do it. But foiling on my own, I feel very, very confident. Foiling with a smallish group of people, always very confident, and we'll just see what happens when we start foiling as large racing groups in competitive environments.
What about on the kites?
Yeah, it's kind of a little bit of what Matt said, in that I definitely feel more safe than in a boat, just because there's nothing to hit really. If you're on your own, it's not that often that people hurt themselves or get hit by the foil, because you're attached to a kite. If you fall in, you can normally get away from the foil. There's a couple of instances where people hit it, but I think on your own it's fairly safe. And you've also, with our kites, we've got a lot of safety equipment, so we can completely unattach our kite. So if we did get into trouble and your kite's dragging you downwind, it's just the safety things. Like, once you know how to kite surf and you know all the safety procedures, you know how to do everything properly. Good thing about kiting is you kind of have to go with a friend, because you can't land or launch a kite by yourself. So it means that you always have to be with people, which is nice. I guess the most dangerous part is racing when you're really close to other people. That's a big part of kite racing, to overtake people or to be pushing the limits. You've got to be pretty close to other people. And I think it's not as much trusting yourself, it's trusting in the other people around you not to do something wrong. There's quite often sort of tangles on the start line. You imagine you've got like 40 kites right next to each other like this. Some of them tangle around each other, which is often quite hectic. But if you know what to do in different situations, and a lot of it is situational stuff, like all us girls have kind of learned, by touch wood, none of us have had any big injuries, and I think there's no reason why that can't carry on at all. And the more you get into different situations, the more you learn for next time. So it might not be a big injury situation, and you're close to someone else and you almost crash into each other, but you avoid it. You're like, oh, next time I'll learn this. And that's just part of the process, I guess, of learning a totally new sport and new racing rules. Well, not rules, but new situations. It's quite, as long as you know how to get out of different situations. And also, just, it doesn't really happen until you're really, really pushing it racing. You can go out cruising. Same with, I guess, Matt and Kirstie. If you just wanted to go out for a cruise and go foiling, then it's definitely, I wouldn't say any more dangerous than anything else.
It's bliss.
I suppose with all of you, like the faster you're going, the more competent you are, the more in the mix you are.
Yeah. And it's kind of the same as every kind of extreme sport. Like, the harder you push it, obviously it's going to be more, there's going to be an element of danger involved, but it doesn't have to lead to injury at all or anything.
Also, what we've found is the more confident we've become sailing the boat and the better feel we've got, the more we can predict when those crashes are going to happen. So
absolutely,
it's really not uncommon for Rupert to shout "brace for impacts" because he can about to let go. And I've got to the point where, because quite often when we crash, Rupert gets a really nice soft landing because I get thrown forward and then he gets thrown and lands on top of me.
Smart.
Yeah. So you want to be at the back of the boat if you don't want to get injured. I got to the point now where I can feel the crashes coming quite often, and I'm there, one hand out to catch myself, one hand out to catch Rupert. And I think
that is the crew there carrying the helm.
Yeah, I'm there like, stay stood up, please. But the more you sail the boat, the more relaxed you become as well. And then actually, because you're relaxed, when you do crash, you're less likely to injure yourself because you're not tense. So there's a little bit around actually just trusting in yourself as well, a little bit, and being relaxed in that space, because we did a whole our physio Laura got us learning how to fall at one point when we were first learning to foil, because she was worried that we'd all be tense, and then that's when the injuries happen. And just the more we foiled, the more we've crashed, we've got used to that feeling, we're not scared by it anymore, and then those injuries just don't happen because you collapse into a soft heap rather than tensing something and then a bone breaking or whatever. Like, so I think the more you do it, the less likely an injury definitely becomes.
Cool. Cracking. Right, at this stage, it's time to basically have a bit of a challenge between you. Okay, so it might be a bit of a, headphones ready to come off. So we have a challenge every week on Motivation Monday. First week we had a quiz between Luke and Saskia, where Luke won 2-1 in a nail-biting finale. Last week we had a cucumber challenge, basically off your forehead into your mouth, or cucumber carrot, where Sass managed to beat Tom Squires when he failed to get his cucumber past his eyebrows. This week, with the three of you, we're going to go from a collect an item from your house. Okay.
Ooh, okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna pick an everyday item. As we've been talking about baking banana bread earlier, I'm gonna pick a key thing for that. So we're gonna go for a wooden spoon. Yeah. If you haven't got a wooden spoon, some sort of mixing spoon would be good. Okay, you ready? First one to get back wins. 3, 2, 1, go. Spikes on your Kirstie's left. Oh, look at that. Kirstie wins. Destroyed them.
Got it.
Ellie seconds. Matt, I'm afraid.
Another spoon. I've only got this.
Spatula.
Oh, that's pretty much it.
Wooden.
The irony is there, Matt, you actually technically win the wooden spoon in that. Right.
Yeah, that makes up for not having one. Perfect.
There you go. We'll get it in the post here, so you can replace the spatula with a wooden
Fantastic.
spoon.
Yeah.
So Kirstie's victorious in week 3. At the end of all this, we are going to have a champion of champions match. We put you all head to head. So currently it's Sam, Kirstie, and Luke in the champion of champions Motivation Monday challenge. So I suppose kind of last bits to finish up with, really. I've got kind of a couple of questions just on general foiling stuff. So would you rather go out on a really, really, really windy day that's really flat, or a perfect wind strength day that's really lumpy?
Ooh.
Oh, this is easy for me.
Okay, go on.
Definitely a flat day. The Nacra starts your bucking bronco that you get completely ejected out of the boat when you cruise down the mine when you're out sailing waves. So definitely a flat day. You get your top speeds when you're on flat water as well, so it's great fun.
Okay, so flat is fast, basically. Like flat is
fast, yeah.
Flat is fast and more controllable. Cool. Ellie?
What's the wind like in terms of gusts? Because my experience on really, really windy and really flat has been very, very gusty, and that's horrible.
Okay, so it's super consistent. Portland Harbour.
Consistent.
Southwesterly Portland Harbour, up at the top.
Yeah, it's got to be that.
Yeah, so flat. So lumpy is the bigger challenge than windy. Or gusty.
Yeah.
Are you saying gusty is a bigger challenge, is it?
Gusty is definitely a bigger challenge.
Okay, so if I gave you the option between so it'd be like gusty is your biggest challenge, then lumpy, then kind of if it's flat and consistent, it's dream boat conditions, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Matt, how about you?
I don't know. I mean, flat water is always lovely, but if it's the perfect wind speed and you're not really over foiling and you're in control of the sail, actually the sailing in waves is really quite fun and a lot more technical, which is more satisfying. So I think I would almost go for the lumpy just because it's more fun challenging if it's nice breeze, but obviously flat water, no, everyone loves sending it, so
yeah,
it's a hard one, but I would tend towards the waves, I think, just for the fun.
I think if I didn't have 4 foils managing, I think I'd talk about the waves a bit more as well, but the trying to keep 4 foils level in waves is quite the logistical nightmare.
Yeah, whilst trying to catch your helm as he falls towards you.
Yeah.
I suppose my last question would be, so obviously America's Cup is foiling, obviously like the F50's foiling in Sail GP. We're going to effectively have 3, so 2024 will have 3 foiling classes in the games, but that actually will be 4 medals effectively. So we're all almost 50% foiling. What do you think? Is it the future? Are we going to Are we all going to just go foiling? Is it the future? What are your thoughts?
Yes. Yeah. I think
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there will always be a place for your conventional sailing boats. Like, there's actually conventional sailing can be really, really technical, and like what Ellie was saying earlier with the fact that it's the little gains in those technical older classes, maybe that more more conventional classes, that's actually the really nice thing about them, that you get to such a high level and it's like the tiny little gains. But I think for the media and for the excitement and the adrenaline rush, foiling all the way forward. Yeah. And it's only going to get better as technology develops. You're going to go quicker.
You wouldn't go back now?
No, I currently someone's trying to persuade me to go 470 sailing with them next cycle. Not a chance.
Wow.
Oh, heard it here first.
Yeah.
You haven't told them yet, have you? It's still on the fence.
Yeah, brutal way to deliver the information there.
By the way,
watch
not
Foiling
interested.
Mondays. For your answer.
It's funny because you've gone really red about it. So.
How about you, Ellie? Is it the future?
I think it probably is. I've kind of always thought that the foiling is the way that things are going. I think Kirstie's right. There's always going to be a place for like your conventional sailing boat, because essentially that is what sailing is. And I think a lot of people probably don't think what we do is sailing. But I think it is the way everything's going to move. Everything's getting faster, more exciting. It's better to watch. It's kind of cool. People think it's quite badass. So I think it is slowly getting there.
Cool, cracking. Okay, we heard it here officially. Right, we're still going to go foiling. Brilliant. Thank you a huge amount for your time, gang, and good luck in the rest of lockdown, and then with your campaigns and stuff after this. And hopefully see you out, not on the water, I suppose, not touching it anyway. Love it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam.
Cool, thank you.